So welcome everyone. Welcome to Farm Radio International's webinar on doing development at a distance. My name is Caroline and I'm the program manager for West Africa at Farm Radio International and the Gender Equality Advisor, and I will be your host for today. So let me begin by just some information on logistics before we dive into the panel. So we will be having translation today. We will have live translation. So that means that in order to be able to hear from the language of your choice, you will have to select the interpretation option. It's at the bottom of your screen. So if you look at the bottom at the right, you should see a circle with lines in it. And so you need to click here and select your language. If you do not see that option, it may need that you will have to download Zoom on your computer instead of watching from the desktop version. So again, at the bottom of your screen on the right. And this is also a reminder for our panelists that we all need to speak slowly to allow for good translation. That is also a good reminder for me. I will be mainly hosting in English, but I will also be speaking in French from time to time. Je vais répéter en français et ensuite ce sera la traduction. Donc, pour m'assurer que tout le monde qui est ici comprenne comment fonctionne l'interprétation. Donc, il y aura la traduction aujourd'hui. Vous devez choisir la langue de préférence en utilisant l'option d'interprétation au bas de votre écran. Donc, vous devez trouver le cercle avec des lignes au bas de votre écran vers la droite et ça devrait être l'option de choisir français ou anglais. Très important d'aller choisir votre langue de choix pour pouvoir entendre. Donc, si vous ne le voyez pas, l'option d'interprétation peut vouloir dire que vous devez télécharger l'application de Zoom. Je vais animer principalement en anglais, mais je vais aussi parler en français de temps à autre. Donc, donnez-moi un instant, je vais moi-même aller choisir ma bonne langue. OK, je pense que ça devrait être bon. Excellent. Okay, in terms of question today, you will be able to ask questions through the webinar, but we will also be using a function here on Zoom to be able to do that. It's the Q&A box. It's also at the bottom of your screen, but a little bit more to the left. And we will answer questions on the chat through the webinar, and we will also have a 20 minutes at the end of the hour so that you can also hear from the panelists, answer your questions. We really encourage you to use this function as we do want to hear your questions and your thoughts. We unfortunately won't have time to do a roundtable, but we would love to see who is with us today. So again, since there is a chat function, feel free to introduce yourself and the organization in the chat. So I hope that everything works in terms of translation. If not, send us a message on the chat and we'll help you. Okay, so today you will be hearing from a group of fascinating development professionals at Farm Radio at the global and country level, but also on the public sector as well. So we will begin by hearing from Ian Pringle, our Director of Programs, and he'll be followed by our colleague Melinda Temba, our Tanzania Program Manager, and Ali Matakonete, our Digital Innovation Team Lead for Francophone Africa. And then we will hear from Yenenesh Egu. She's from the Ministry of Agriculture in Ethiopia, and from Paul Siame from the Ministry of Food and Agriculture of Ghana. And finally, our Executive Director, Kevin Perkins, will share his perspective on the way forward. I will now be speaking French. And I will change my language. OK. Donc, les interventions de nos panélistes aujourd'hui vont viser à partager l'approche de RRI en matière de travail à distance, mais aussi de réfléchir sur les différentes technologies pour nous permettre de faire ce travail à distance-là et d'entendre parler des défis aussi et comment on les a surmontés. Ensuite, on va entendre parler du virage vers lequel le secteur public aussi se dirige pour travailler dans ce nouveau format-là et dans quelle mesure là, les interventions en technologie de l'information et des communications peuvent tracer une voie à suivre. Donc, on va maintenant commencer avec notre premier panéliste. Il s'agit de Ian Pringle. Ian est notre directeur de programme depuis 2015. Il est un spécialiste de la communication avec plus de 30 ans d'expérience en leadership organisationnel, en élaboration et en exécution de programmes. Il a travaillé en Asie du Sud-Est, en Asie du Sud, en Afrique subsaharienne, dans les Caraïbes, dans les Pacifiques. Donc, on est bien entouré aujourd'hui. Ian va commencer par nous parler des méthodes de la radio agricole et comment est-ce qu'on a dû changer pour s'adapter à la pandémie. Il va aussi nous partager quelques faits saillants là, de comment on s'est adapté avec notre réponse. Donc, à toi, Ian.
Merci Caroline, c'est vraiment un plaisir d'être ici avec vous tous. We generally spend quite a bit of time talking about our results, which is something that we are very proud of at Farm Radio. We help serve over 100 million people annually on a budget of $6 million. Research shows that our projects deliver adoption rates of up to 40%, with an average of 20%. But today we want to talk a little bit more about our approach and methods and how they've changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. I like to say that we do development a little bit differently at Farm Radio than most international organizations, and that's because of our methods. Using existing radio services and phone-based solutions, we are used to talking and listening at a distance. And through quality programming, we're used to achieving results at a distance. You could say that even before the pandemic, we were a distance development organization. So when the pandemic started to take hold back in March, we were very popular. Suddenly, everybody wanted to talk to us about radio for agriculture, for education, for health, to address gender and other inequalities. And we were very busy. We put in 15 project proposals in a month, which was definitely a record for us. So today we're going to talk about what it's been like to work 100% at a distance and ask the question, will we go back to the way things were before? We are a communication for development organization. Now, C4D is a specific field of study, but it's also quite literally what we do. People talking to each other to bring about positive change. In our line of work, the development brought about by people talking to each other about positive, or to each other to bring about positive change, is centered on information and knowledge that enable people individually and together to improve their livelihoods and health. For example, changes in agriculture or health practices. The who of our work is centered on farming families in sub-Saharan Africa. It means the focus of our work is on rural areas, which generally means marginalized in terms of access to any kind of knowledge services. Increasingly, Farm Radio's development services center on women as users, addressing gender inequality as an issue for both men and women is also a priority. We also recognize that youth are the future. A few things that help to define Farm Radio's approach. For us, rights-based means that we approach the elements of development as rights. For example, people have rights to expression and to information, which means that all people have a right to expression and information. And that implies that our job is to see those rights as universally met as possible, ideally 100%, at least that's our goal. So as an approach, this leads us to place urgency on working at scale. It also underpins the priority we place on working with a systems approach and with public structures. For example, extension services, which we will hear from in a few minutes. The most important rights for us are the rights to information and communication, because here there is a massive gap. Consider the access to productive knowledge that you have with a smartphone in your pocket versus what a farming family, a whole community has, say, in rural Mali. For that family, a few hours weekly on the local radio that talks about their crops, their climate, their problems, and appropriate solutions in their language at a time of day that is convenient for them might be a bit ambitious given the current reality. But that's not because of COVID-19. Farmers' situation, even pre-pandemic, was characterized by limited opportunities to access relevant information or quality programming, or the chance to interact with those information. In a nutshell, limited access to development opportunities, even the ones that can be driven primarily on a farming family's own knowledge and initiative. In other words, those that start with information and communication, like good agricultural practices or rejecting gender-based violence. The only way that we can possibly meet sub-Saharan Africa's information and communication needs is by leveraging scalable communication technology. Using technology, we can develop how-to materials that can be endlessly replicated to support quality programming. We can offer services that reach practically everyone. And using technology, we can harvest data that allows us to quickly analyze evolving needs. Technology can't do it, but the right actors can leverage technology to do it. This is within our grasp today. Farm Radio's network has grown and strengthened to over 1,000 radio stations. In 41 sub-Saharan countries, this network is a unique and powerful asset. It reaches hundreds of millions of people every day. In our COVID emergency response work, which is largely funded by Global Affairs Canada, we created resource materials for radio stations. We opened a hotline for broadcasters to debunk misinformation, check facts. We mobilized 26 local networkers who have been engaging radio station producers and presenters in 20 local African languages. We organized over 110 discussions using WhatsApp and other social media, and we provided direct support to more than 120 radio stations to help keep them on the air. Working with CODE, a Canadian educational organization, we're running a distance learning project in Liberia and Sierra Leone, reaching primary school learners that are otherwise out of school. And working with 5 regional and continental farmers organizations, FAO, and more than 100 of our radio station partners, we've been running the Voice for Family Farmers campaign to recognize and celebrate the backbone of our food system. Our project-based revenues are projected to be up by 30% this year, likely even more next year, with delivery in at least 16 countries, which represents 100% growth in the last 5 years. With the pandemic, in many cases, 100% of our work was done at a distance. And this has started to change, but it's not back to normal. These changes were demanded by circumstances. Because of the pandemic, we had to pivot. In addition to regular face-to-face work like meetings and consultations, we also have a set of specific methods that are based on face-to-face interactions, which of course were not possible and in some cases still aren't. And there's a whole new set of challenges. But at the top of the list is gender equality in terms of access to technology and agency, but also a context of increased gender-based violence and other issues. 2 of my colleagues, Ermelinda Temba and Alimata Konate, are going to share more insights on the adaptation and use of these remote-led methods. I wanted to leave you with a reflection on how things are changing as a result of COVID-19. No doubt we are all dealing with a lot of practical changes to avoid face-to-face approaches in our work. And of course, we end up asking ourselves if there are things that should stay changed. Should we, for example, continue to do development at distance because it's lower cost, more scalable? Distance methods like communication for development using radio and mobile phones produce results, but they do it for tens, even hundreds of millions of family farmers. Lots is changing. At a personal level, I now consult with my doctor over the phone, which saves me time and money. I avoid health risks and I use less gas. There's some glitches, but it sure seems like win-win. Education is definitely, and conferences. About a year ago, I spent some time with the head of the International Association for Media and Communication Researchers, who told me how excited he was about their annual research gathering, usually a couple of thousand people, which was headed to Nairobi, the first time this important event would be held in Africa. But given the state of our planet, he also questioned the basic idea of flying a couple of thousand people around every year on long-haul flights. And I'm sure we've all had the same misgivings about travel, especially big conferences. Today is a great example, and maybe distance conferences are a better way to go. Let me finish by saying thank you for joining us at a distance, and stay tuned for more about how development is changing during the pandemic and beyond.
Merci, merci beaucoup, Ian. Je pense que ça commence très bien les discussions. Sarah, pardon, petite note pour la traduction. Quand je suis dans la salle en français, donc je pense que... Merci. OK. Donc, au cours des discussions aujourd'hui, vous allez beaucoup entendre parler du terme ULISA. Donc, permettez-moi juste de vous expliquer un peu de quoi il s'agit quand on dit ULISA. Comme ça va vous permettre de bien comprendre le reste de la conversation. Donc, ULISA, en fait, c'est une suite de services qui a été développée par Radio Rurale Internationale dans l'objectif de favoriser l'interaction entre l'auditoire et les stations de radio. Donc, l'objectif, c'est d'utiliser les technologies comme la téléphonie mobile ou des services de réponse vocale interactifs pour permettre aux communautés d'échanger avec la radio rapidement, gratuitement et facilement. Donc, je ne vous en dis pas plus, mais vous allez en entendre parler un peu plus au cours de la prochaine présentation. Je vais maintenant parler en anglais. Okay, now I would like to hear from our colleague, Eri Melinda Timba, as she shares her experience being the program manager for Farm Radio International in Tanzania. So Eri Melinda has been a key member of our country office in Tanzania since 2016, where she has been leading, implementing, and overseeing interactive radio projects since then. Eri Melinda, could you share with us a little bit more about your experience in your country about, working and designing interactive radio series at a distance?
Thank you so much, Caroline. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As I'm introduced by Caroline, I am Eri Melinda Temba as a program manager working in Tanzania Farm Radio Office. So the pandemic did come at the time when we were implementing a number of projects, and stopping implementing the project wasn't an option. Therefore, remote-led methods were the only option that helped us continue working. There were a number of activities that were implemented 100% using the remote-led methods. Such included designing the radio content for the radio programs. We had a project in Kigoma and Kagera, the western part of the country, and we had to develop the content to make sure the program goes on air. But at the same time, we had to make sure we do a quick training to the radio stations that had to do these programs, which was 100% done using remote-led by our Radiocraft team. But at the same time, when the programs were on air, we had to do the coordination, making sure the program production and airing of these projects, radio programs, is still happening regardless. We cannot meet face to face. Also, we had to continue doing the monitoring. Most of the time, we relied on the ULISA data, as earlier explained, the ULISA. So our communications to farmers, to extensions, really relied on the available data in our ULISA systems. So at this point, when we were able to do this, we came up, there were two important factors that we can appreciate from the remote-led methods. One, it proved to be very cost-effective because in all of these activities, it mostly required either internet or airtime from our end or from other stakeholders that took part in the activities. So it really saved a lot of costs that could have been involved either in the venues, in the transportations, allowances, and all of that. So we invested more in internet and airtime to accomplish our activities. But again, it was the only best way we could keep our teams, both here and in the field, safe and avoid any spread of infections or contaminations. And the good thing, most all of the team that we worked with remained safe. However, it wasn't very smooth. There are some of challenges we experienced. One of the biggest challenge was the issue of connectivity. So in our activities, we would work mostly with farmers, other stakeholders from rural areas or any other parts. So connection sometimes was really a challenge and somehow distracted some of the activities. But again, the issue of language barrier, now that we connect virtually, there were different groups, some from other countries, some from rural areas. In here, we came to find that there were two major languages that most groups were common. Some were very competent in Kiswahili, some were very competent in English. At this point, it was somehow challenging among us to be able to connect while doing our activities. Again, we noticed now that we are connecting virtually, sometimes it was a little bit difficult to get all the people fully attention to the activity, and especially at some point if a language barrier was an issue. So a group that was not very well understanding certain language, somehow it lost the attention to what was happening simply because they don't understand. Whilst if it was in Kiswahili or face-to-face, it would have been a bit easier to draw and get the fully attention of the participants. But again, another challenge was while connecting, we would use different means of communication. Some would be connecting using the Google Meet, some would use teleconference, and some would use all of this to make sure we can speak in order, in clarity and all of that. So somehow it did distract in management of all the people that connected using different channels. But at the end of the day, it remained manageable. Coming to the end, it was very clear to us as implementing teams. It is very possible we could have face-to-face moment that is very okay, but just like COVID-19 came with no notice, we need to still take some attention for the remote-led methods in case anything happens unexpectedly. So they were helpful in making sure we still continue to do our work. So we still need to continue giving attention, even when face-to-face looks very possible. Thank you.
Excellent. Donc, merci beaucoup, Eri Melinda. Je pense qu'effectivement, quand on fait le changement vers un travail à distance, ça nous demande énormément de temps d'adaptation. Donc, c'est très intéressant d'entendre comment on s'est rendu là en Tanzanie. J'aimerais maintenant entendre parler de l'expérience de ma collègue Alimata Konaté du côté de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Donc, Alimata, elle est chef d'équipe des innovations numériques pour l'Afrique francophone. Elle est ingénieure des réseaux et des télécommunications de formation et puis elle possède 8 ans d'expérience dans le domaine des technologies de l'information et des communications. Alimata s'intéresse particulièrement à leur utilisation dans le contexte de communication pour le développement et puis elle est aussi très engagée dans l'adaptation des technologies pour favoriser la participation des femmes. Donc, Alima, peux-tu nous parler de la réalité du Burkina Faso en la matière, mais aussi des défis particuliers que vivent les femmes quand on travaille à distance?
Merci, Caroline. Bonjour, chers participants et participantes. Je suis Alimata Konaté. Alors, comme abordé par mes collègues, la crise sanitaire Covid a beaucoup impacté notre façon de travailler au Burkina et dans les autres pays francophones également. Nous avons dû nous adapter rapidement afin de respecter nos engagements. En effet, avant la pandémie, plusieurs de nos activités d'opération, telles que les rencontres et formations avec nos partenaires, se faisaient sur le terrain dans les zones d'intervention du projet et en présentiel. Donc, avec la situation de crise, on ne pouvait plus organiser ces rencontres-là pour le respect des mesures barrières. Donc, au Burkina, qu'est-ce que nous avons fait? Nous avions déjà des rencontres avec le comité de gestion du projet, de nos projets et également des rencontres planifiées avec les parties prenantes. Donc, il fallait trouver une solution pour pouvoir tenir ces rencontres. Rapidement, nous avons eu à contacter les participants. Malheureusement, ils n'avaient pas tous d'adresse email, d'autres n'avaient pas d'accès à l'ordinateur et également la connexion Internet n'était pas toujours stable. Donc, qu'est-ce que nous avons fait? On a constaté que tous ces participants avaient accès au groupe WhatsApp. Donc, nous avons eu à créer des groupes WhatsApp, échanger avec eux et organiser la tenue des rencontres en ligne. Donc, pour pouvoir faire, avant la rencontre, nous avons eu à faire un renforcement des capacités individuelles de ces participants sur l'utilisation des outils de rencontres en ligne comme Google Meet et Zoom. Ce n'était pas vraiment simple pour ces personnes de tenir pendant plusieurs heures en ligne pour ces rencontres et autres, mais avec l'engagement à leur niveau, nous avons su vraiment organiser, mettre des pauses pour nous permettre, par exemple, de travailler, créer des espèces de travail de groupe pour pouvoir présenter nos activités réalisées et aussi discuter des plans d'action et autres. Donc, également, avec la formation de nos radiodiffuseurs, nous avions également prévu des formations, mais il se trouvait que ces formations, généralement, on les fait en présentiel dans les stations radio, étant donné que nous ne pouvons pas se déplacer. Donc, on a dû organiser de la même façon que nous avons organisé les rencontres avec les comités, les membres du comité de gestion. Nous avons organisé également nos formations avec les radios partenaires. Cette expérience nous a vraiment aidé parce que ça nous a permis de travailler, d'assister ces radiodiffuseurs-là pendant leur travail et de les soutenir pendant cette crise de pandémie COVID. Donc, il y avait également des défis que ces radiodiffuseurs rencontraient pour la production de nos émissions, puisqu'on n'avait pas arrêté. Donc, et ces défis qu'ils rencontraient également, c'était de pouvoir faire des interviews, faire des interviews avec les personnes ressources dans les émissions et également faire des micro-trottoirs. Il était un peu difficile pour eux d'avoir des personnes toujours qui peuvent se déplacer parce qu'ils n'avaient pas les équipements nécessaires et autres pour respecter les mesures de prévention de COVID. Donc, du coup, avec ces radios, on a eu à faire des rencontres sur comment ils peuvent utiliser et faire des interviews à distance avec les téléphones pour pouvoir avoir des informations pour le contenu des émissions. Également pour les micro-trottoirs, ma collègue a parlé de Elisa, notre plateforme, et ils ne pouvaient plus se déplacer, aller s'approcher de la population pour faire les micro-trottoirs. Donc, nous avons dit également essayer de trouver une solution avec Elisa pour identifier des groupes de personnes qui peuvent participer à des questions de micro-trottoirs dans les émissions et les envoyer. Ils ont été informés à l'avance et ils ont pu, à travers Elisa, réaliser ces micro-trottoirs-là. Un autre défi que nous avions rencontré pendant cette crise est la mobilisation, surtout la mobilisation des femmes autour des émissions. Donc, on avait du mal vraiment à avoir beaucoup de participation des femmes. La participation avait vraiment baissé. Donc, il fallait trouver un moyen de pouvoir booster cette participation-là. On a du coup lancé des concours, un concours de participation aux émissions qui motivait les femmes à participer au sondage des émissions. Donc, ça a été cette expérience avec la crise COVID nous a amené vraiment à pousser la réflexion, à trouver d'autres solutions pour s'adapter à la crise et pouvoir continuer à faire notre travail. Mais ça a également permis d'avoir cette ouverture, d'avoir d'autres approches de travail qui peuvent nous aider à l'avenir pour atteindre nos objectifs. Également, par exemple, au Burkina Faso, nous avions eu avant avant même la COVID, nous faisons face également à la crise sécuritaire. Dans certaines de nos zones d'intervention, nous ne pouvons pas nous rendre sur le terrain. Pour l'évaluation d'un de nos projets dans une des zones d'intervention, nous avons dû utiliser, par exemple, ULISA pour faire une évaluation de nos émissions. Il y a eu un échantillonnage avec un questionnaire que nous avons administré à travers la ULISA. Donc, cette expérience nous a vraiment servi pendant la crise COVID parce qu'il y avait toujours la question de pouvoir se déplacer. Donc, du coup, nous sommes servis de cette expérience également pour mener certaines activités sur le terrain.
OK.
Ici, dans le temps.
Je crois que je n'entendais pas la traduction en anglais, donc je voulais juste m'assurer que tout fonctionnait bien.
OK.
Are we okay with translation in English? Were we able to hear what Alimata was able to say?
Just the very end we missed, Carolyn.
Okay.
Just the very, very end, the last point.
OK. Donc, Alima, si tu veux juste répéter ton dernier point pour les personnes qui écoutent en anglais.
OK. Le dernier point, je parlais de notre expérience d'évaluation que nous avons eu à faire via la plateforme ULISA. J'expliquais au Burkina particulièrement, nous avons les pays rencontrent des problèmes de sécurité. Donc, lors de la mise en œuvre d'un de nos projets, l'une des zones d'intervention, nous n'avons pas la possibilité de nous rendre sur le terrain pour faire l'évaluation de notre programme. Donc, nous avons utilisé notre plateforme ULISA pour administrer les questionnaires d'évaluation aux personnes de la zone d'intervention. Donc, cette expérience nous a servi dans le cadre pendant la crise COVID parce que nous n'avions pas également la possibilité de se déplacer dans la situation sécuritaire. Donc, c'est ce point. C'est bon, Caroline. C'est bon?
Okay. But now you are back and we had backup. So I think we are good to continue. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Alimata. So now we have heard from mostly Farm Radio's experience, and now what I would like to hear is also from the public sector as well, and how we've been adapting to this context. So Yenanesh Egu, she's the Director of Agricultural Extension Directorate from the Ministry of Agriculture in Ethiopia. Yenanesh is a rural development and agricultural extension professional with many years of experience from a grassroots to a national level. Yenanesh, can you tell us a bit more about the ministry's mitigation strategy when we were hit by COVID-19?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. Hello, everyone. I want to start from, I need to say something about public extension system in Ethiopia. Public agricultural extension services are dominant in a country, which means low involvement of private sector, NGO and cooperative in extension and advisory service. So overburdened government in extension, especially in infrastructure, establishing farmer training center, pastoral training center, agricultural, technical, vocational and education college, also ICT infrastructure, but still with approximately 21 development agents for 10,000 farmers can reach. And we have also more than 60,000 development agents at grassroots grassroots level, greater than 14,000 farmer training center, pastoral training center. We are giving information for farmers. We are introducing different agricultural technologies and also creating technology demand for farmers. We are giving different agricultural information for our farmers and skill and knowledge-based training for our farmers. Currently, we need to go to pluralistic extension. We need to invite private sector, cooperatives, and also agro dealers and NGOs working on agricultural extension. So we are starting to establish pluralistic extension all over the country. Next slide, please. Yeah, the strategy designed, market-oriented extension strategy designed in the ministry. One pillar is pluralistic extension. The other is ICT for extension. ICT used in supporting agricultural extension during COVID-19. Ministry of Agriculture acted very early for designing COVID-19 mitigation strategy and plan. Also, we in place different alternative extension communication channel. Currently, we are using. Before the COVID-19, we are focusing on face-to-face extension or individual extension and also group extension system. But currently, that is difficult to going on that way. So radio, television, IVR 8028, short message, posters, short social media. Also, we are using megaphone as a mass communication. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. We are now collaborating with Farm Radio International. Ministry of Agriculture has signed memorandum of understanding with Farm Radio International in Ethiopia for long. Ministry of Agriculture partnered with Farm Radio International, especially Bureau of Agriculture with Regional Bureau of Agriculture. Apart from using this regular radio program, Ministry of Agriculture believe to work with interactive radio program to be more successful to influence technology, creating technology demand for technology adoption. So we are working closely with Farm Radio International because currently in Ethiopia, mobile access also increasing and network infrastructure also, government commitment also there to use ICT solutions for agricultural advisory service. When we see Ethiopian farmer during plowing, during sowing, and also during harvesting time, and when they are weeding, they are listening radio program. Even old farmers, pastoralists, women, if the time is convenient for them, they are listening radio. Also disabled, marginalized group, even as you know, extension communication, there is different kind of farmer, innovators, early adopters, and also there is resistant farmers. So those resistant farmers also listening radio and taking their different knowledge and implementing on their plots. So we need to continue to work with Farm Radio International. It is a little bit interactive and good. So even COVID is over, we need to continue ICT for extension. We have to continue ICT-based advisory service, because one-to-one extension service and also group extension service without good work environment or facility for development agent. As I told you, we have more than 60,000 development agents at grassroots level. So the work environment is not that much convenient for them. They don't have enough support of transport facilities, so they need to go to a long distance, like 20 kilometers, 40 kilometers to support farmers and pastoralists. So we need to continue in ICT solutions, especially we need to work with Farm Radio International to support our farmers, a marginalized group also. Please continue. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting to hear also about this need to be adapting those solutions that we are offering to the different kind of farmers that we are working with. So it would be interesting to look a little bit more into this. And today we also have with us Paul Siami. He's a director of Agricultural Extension Service in Ghana. And Paul has worked in rural and agricultural extension since 1996. Over his career, he has been responsible for developing training and extension programs for farmer-based organizations across Ghana. So Paul, could you tell us more about what it is like in Ghana? Is it a similar experience to what Yinanesh was sharing?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. The Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Ghana values and appreciates the role of radio in changing people's attitude and educating the general populace. The recent pandemic further reinforced this conviction, where the whole country were taken by surprise with the outbreak of COVID-19. But through the radio and our television networks, we were able to educate so many of our citizenry, resulting in the change in attitude and behavior towards containing the COVID-19 pandemic. It greatly contributed to the level of reduction in positive cases in COVID-19 as we have in Ghana currently. So the ministry recognizes the value of radio in changing people's attitude. Unfortunately, we have been using radio in Ghana in the past for more of social communication, social change, for social purposes, not for agricultural technology dissemination. Due to this, we realized it, and before even the outbreak of the pandemic, knowing the experiences we have had with Farm Radio International collaboration with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, first in the outbreak of fall armyworm, the way we rode on the back of Farm Radio International partnered radio stations to change people's thinking or what they know about fall armyworm and how to manage it. Because of this, we contacted Farm Radio, and then together they agreed to assist us develop a digital agricultural advisory services strategy and plan. And how were we going to use this opportunity? They will help us develop digital advisory decks. We are currently in the process of developing such decks by grooming and mentoring. That's Farm Radio assisting us, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, to groom and mentor selected staff at the national, regional, and district levels in Ghana. These trained officials will serve as digital advisory agents and will work closely with designated radio stations that operate. I must say that we are blessed to have so many radio stations in the country. Virtually in every region, you have not less than 10 radio stations. So there are a number of them, and some have expressed the desire and willingness to partner the Ministry of Food and Agriculture through Farm Radio collaboration with us. Now, with this program, it has so many benefits we envisage to our smallholder farmers because it will serve as a linking various ICT opportunities with the digital advisory decks. And also we think that using radio, it will help drive traffic or generate demand for knowledge, agricultural technical knowledge to our e-agriculture call centers, as well as the IVR services we have. So that is why we see the road that radio will help drive traffic and move people to our ICT, that's e-agriculture call centers and the interactive voice response services that we have. It will also help many of our communities that are remote from the center using ICT, like the digital design. But for radio, we are blessed that many of our local, very difficult to reach locations have radio to use. Further, we will take advantage of what Farm Radio had. We have, in previous experiences and knowing what they do in other jurisdictions, the use of the green leaf programs, the content from those programs to share and develop further relevant ones that meet the needs of Ghana. Then, like we have currently getting all the relevant information for the 16 regional agri offices that we have, and then they are getting the relevant training so that after the training, these people will help in this use of radio because the necessary competencies will be built in them and it will help. We also think that the use of radio have been minimal in using it to train our farmers so that we don't end with agricultural technical knowledge dissemination, but linkages to markets and other sources will also be upscale using the DAX project. Thank you.
Many thanks, Paul. And I can already see in the Q&A section and on the chat that people have a lot of interest for what you and Yadanesh have been saying. So we will definitely come back to this in a minute. It really appears to me that COVID-19 has brought upon all of us to be looking at remote-led practices so that we can really offer support to vulnerable communities and those living in rural areas. I will now ask Kevin Perkins, the Executive Director of Farm Radio International, to share his thoughts on how we think that we can move forward in this direction and what is his vision for the long term. Kevin has been the Executive Director of Farm Radio since 2006. He has overseen the growth of Farm Radio from a small organization of 4 employees and a yearly budget of about $500,000 to today, where Farm Radio, we are an organization of 99 employees and we have a yearly budget of over $6 million. So Kevin, as someone who has led Farm Radio in various transitions to constantly adapt and strive to serve rural communities, what is your take on this situation?
Thank you, Carolyn, and thanks everyone for your very interesting comments and reflections and information shared so far. You know, the quest for achieving sustainable development goals, it presents us with many challenges, and today we've talked about one of these challenges that has several dimensions, and that is how can we catalyze change, positive development-oriented change at a meaningful scale, change at an optimal scale. And clearly this involves communication, sharing knowledge, sparking and mediating conversations, gathering feedback, and using that to learn, adapt, and improve. And clearly, if billions are to be reached and engaged and served, much of this communication must be done from a distance. And COVID-19 has put an exclamation point on that statement. Communication technology means that everyone can be reached and connected with information. And this is not something new. Nearly 100 years ago, Emily Green Balch, the American economist and recipient of the 1946 Nobel Peace Prize, she said, technology gives us the facilities that lessen the barriers of time and distance. She spoke of the telegraph and cable, telephone, radio, and she said, and the rest. And of course, we've seen and the rest being, at that time, unimaginable new communication technologies. But do they allow the kind of conversations and the deeper probing, the weighing of options, the contextualization that leads to thoughtful, positive change? Or is direct face-to-face connection necessary? Well, we've seen the potential of communication technology to spark change at a distance, but this hasn't always been positive change. We've seen communication technologies drive the kind of changes that are antithetical to the Sustainable Development Goals. We've seen the perils of breaking it down too small into digits, where change is driven not by discussion and conversation, but things, expressions that are new to us, echo chambers and bots and algorithms, and amplifying deceptive emotion hyping tweets and Instagram posts. You know, doing development from a distance is powerful, so it must be done responsibly and intentionally. The best of the old analog methods, radio methods, the interview, the panel discussion, documentary, case study, the Q&A, the debate, even soap operas, they still need to be there in our doing development from a distance. New digital can make these better. And we've heard about some of the exciting ways that digital is making our communications more meaningful, intimate, and reflective. They can bring in more diverse voices and address some of the most challenging change goals, such as gender equality. They also make it more far-reaching and even more cost-effective. Over the course of this webinar, we've heard about how Farm Radio International and the Ministries of Agriculture in Ethiopia and Ghana are using distance methods to support and drive development for rural communities. Success has required blending approaches of new media with old, digital with radio, conversations with data. We're finding new ways to bring these methods not only to the challenge of communicating with rural communities, but to the management of development itself, the planning, the training, the monitoring and evaluation work. Indeed, here we are now connecting and sharing knowledge and engaging in dialogue with our peers and development partners using communication technology from a distance. As we make more and more use of these remote-led methods, we want to use them to increase inclusion, improve access for people on the less served side of the digital divide, and tackle difficult development challenges like gender transformation. We need to bring stakeholders together to ensure that such methods achieve these kinds of goals. In particular, partnership with the public sector is key. Development-oriented communication is a public good, and it's been a privilege for us to work closely with the Ministries of Agriculture, Food Security in Ethiopia and Ghana to support their efforts to provide this good to their farmers. And that's some of the things I'm taking away from these reflections and these case studies on the use of remote-led methods. And I really look forward to continuing and building on them and finding new and ever better ways to use remote-led development from a distance to bring about the kind of change at scale that the world needs to see. So thanks very much for this opportunity to offer some closing remarks, Carolyn, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. We I am very much aware that we are now close to the hour that we've scheduled for this webinar, but we have so many interesting questions. If some of you are willing to stay for an extra maybe 15 minutes, I know that some responses were also offered in the Q&A box. So for all of you, you can always click on the Q&A box and go see the questions that are answered. That would be the second tab, I believe, for you. And in the meantime, I will ask a couple of questions that came up in the chat to some of our panelists. We won't be able to cover everything, but at least we can hear a little bit more their insights. And we will close right after this. So perhaps my first question would be mainly for Ian. Ian, could you tell us a bit more about our experiences in using the network to promote behavioral change needed to prevent the spread of COVID-19? Do you have any evidence of its effectiveness so far?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, at Farm Radio, we are we're very concerned, and we place quite a strong emphasis on being able to substantiate our claims. And I think one of the remarkable things about Farm Radio as an organization is its history of being able to produce real tangible evidence of the, you know, not just putting programs on air or how many people are reached at the output level, but really at that outcome level. How can we speak to the real changes that are brought about through the programming that we support putting out there? So, you know, in terms of how we use the network is over 1,000 stations in 41 countries. So that aspect of our work is a very broad reach. So the materials that we put out that are about good behavioral practices during the pandemic, those materials are really excellent materials, and we are able to distribute those very, very widely. So those materials, those resources go to all of the stations in our network and all of the individual broadcasters associated with it. So it's a very wide reach. It's in 41 countries. We did more focused support to enable broadcasters. So our focus as an organization is building the capacity of those broadcasters as the intermediaries. So we had the big reach, 1,000 stations, 41 countries with resources. In a smaller number of countries where we have a stronger presence, through these local networkers that we engaged, through our own staff, and through these WhatsApp discussions, we were able to provide another level of support and information to stations to enable them to do good programming about good behavioral practices, good public health practices during the pandemic. So we're able to really extend the information a long way. What's challenging in terms of the evidence is that the approaches that we would usually use to speak to outcome level evidence are just not possible in that at this time within that approach to doing programming, because we tend to be quite far removed from the programming. Whereas in a project context or a more traditional project context, we can bookend programming with household surveys and really be able to provide really rich data and really good evidence. And that simply has not been possible in our COVID response project. Now, we realize this is a priority, and so we will do some evaluation, but those evaluations will be more summative and will look more at the results and the perceptions of broadcasters. It just won't be possible for us to produce the kind of evidence we're used to providing in this particular context. And we, as a team, we're really thinking about going forward, how will we be able to do that?
Thanks, Ian, for sharing your insights on this. The next question would be for both Yunesh and Paul. As you explained, you've been experiencing working with Farm Radio for a little while now on using radio, our interactive radio strategy, as an extension tool, basically. So could you share with us a little bit more about what would you see being the value added of working with an organization like Farm Radio on this?
Okay, thank you. When we are using radio currently, especially in COVID-19, as I told you, the face-to-face extension approach and group extension approach almost all stopped. Then the development agent just awareing our farmers, development group and group leader at grassroots level. So they're communicating with them, and some areas also using megaphone and mobile phone to listen radio program. Then the development agent burden now minimized. As I told you, they are going long distance to support our farmers. Even in COVID-19, it is very difficult. So their burden minimized, and our farmers, even before COVID-19, we are giving training in extension package. But this year we didn't give them extension package training for our farmers, our pastoralists also. So this radio program support us very much, because the farmers getting information from radio, the development agent supporting, awareing them by keeping their distance. So awareness creation, technology introduction. For example, for desert locust, we are giving information for our farmers, and also for sowing and chemical utilization, how our farmers harvesting their crop without without staying delaying without in COVID-19. So we are wearing our farmers, we are sending different technical message for them. The development agent get relief, and our getting different information about their farming.
Thank you very much, Yananesh. Paul, would you like to weigh in on this as well? And you could always expand a little bit as well on the role of agricultural extension worker, and how this has changed when they use interactive radio during this this context.
Looks like maybe Paul is having a connection problem, Caroline.
I was wondering if it was my connection and thinking I was the only one not hearing. Paul, we're very sorry. We can't hear you very well right now. If you can hear us, you can always maybe type in the chat, or if not, we can share your response afterwards a little bit more. But we can jump into the next question that I can see here. Okay, so we have a question around the use of radio and virtual means of communication. So our participant would like to know a little bit more about how this is possible for those living in ultra poverty with limited network and infrastructures to continue using community-based development interventions. So the example here is working on, I'm sorry, I'm reading the question at the same time, with very clear hands-on activities such as agriculture for food security, constructing latrines and other wash components. So basically, how is this working when we are aiming to reach the hardest to reach? Perhaps this question could be answered by Eri Melinda or Alimata.
Thank you, Caroline. I would So basically, there are different other options that we can choose to opt when a radio becomes a little bit not reaching to certain places. For example, the use of community listening groups. So this is one approach we use when we can hardly reach a certain part of a country or within target communities. We opt to do the community listening groups, whereby there are a group of farmers that have been strengthened in the area and they have been able to receive the solar powered radio, that they can be able to receive a recorded program, and then they could be listening to a group. And then the one feature about this radio is they can also record. So if there's a question or something for follow-up, they can still record it and it can be transferred back to either the expert or radio program response be provided back to the particular group. So that can be one way we can use to reach the unreached.
Thanks, Melinda. Alimata, would you also like to share your thoughts on this? How is it possible for us to really be supporting the hard to reach?
Effectivement, dans les zones où la radio, OK. OK, merci. Là, dans les zones où les agriculteurs, nos auditeurs ont du mal à capter la radio, ça peut être parce qu'ils ne sont pas dans la couverture de la radio, ça peut être souvent aussi lié à la période. Et pour ça, nous avons des solutions pour leur permettre d'avoir accès à nos programmes. Donc, en plus des groupes d'écoute qui ont la possibilité d'enregistrer les émissions sur les postes d'écoute et de partager, nous avons discuté avec les radios qui expliquent à la population comment est-ce qu'ils peuvent télécharger les émissions par Bluetooth. Donc, quand ils sont intéressés par les émissions, donc à travers certains de nos programmes, il y a des gens qui se déplaçaient d'une zone où ils n'ont pas accès à la couverture de la radio pour venir chercher les émissions et ils se partagent par Bluetooth. Comme ils se partagent, les gens ont l'habitude de se partager la musique par Bluetooth. Merci, Caroline.
Thank you. I think we have Paul being back now. Is this correct, Paul? Could you say hi? And if we can hear you, we had a question for you.
Yeah, yes, I'm back.
Okay, this is great. So we would like to know a little bit more about the role of agriculture extension worker and how it has changed with the use of interactive radio programming during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, thank you very much. Like I said, the way we used to do extension has changed because the pandemic situation will not allow for closer face-to-face interaction. So we needed to fall on radio mostly. In addition, we also had to use other innovative digital platforms. Like I was mentioning, I thought I was still online. The use of digital classroom system, just a simple, easy to use palm top keyboard with a projector and a solar system. So for areas where it with radio, because some location signals were weak, then we had to fall on the extension agent actually doing physical visit in a location by projecting the material to be shared with the farmers on the screen, keeping the appropriate distances between himself or herself and the listening farmers or the farmers that the person works with. So that is what we encourage. And we had, under a program with AGRA, procured and supported 28 districts using that equipment. We think that post-COVID, and in addition to complementing the physical interaction, this is another way, a digital platform to complement the physical visit, whilst radio will be a major way of improving outreach and using our extension agents. Like I said, we will use the radio to drive them to the other alternatives that we have, the IVR system, the call centers, the e-agriculture call centers, or they need traffic, and until we get many people on radio. So this is the way we as a ministry, as a country, want to go in the coming days.
Great, thank you very much. And I will ask one more question, and then unfortunately, we will have to wrap up this webinar. But we seem to be having a lot of interest around the use of EULISA, which is something that we've touched a little bit more about. So perhaps I would like to ask Alimata to give us a little bit more information about what do you think are really the big opportunities that we have with a system like this in time of COVID. For example, we're having question about those vulnerable communities that want to use systems like this to allow for interactions, but that, for example, can't read or write. How does that really work? And maybe just a minute or two, and then we will close.
OK, merci, Ara. En fait, pour les communautés vulnérables, EULISA, nous avons travaillé vraiment à briser certaines barrières, barrières d'accès à EULISA dont le coût fait partie. Et déjà, à travers nos projets, les coûts d'appel sont pris en charge. Donc, ça permet, par exemple, aux personnes qui n'ont pas les moyens pour avoir des crédits de pouvoir participer. Et puis, pour mobiliser la participation, nous avons des approches. Et il y a des promos, des sketchs radiophoniques qui passent à la radio, qui expliquent aux gens le processus à suivre pour participer au sondage des émissions. Et également, les groupes d'écoute communautaires sont également des relais. Ils reçoivent des formations sur comment utiliser et participer à EULISA et à leur niveau également, ils essaient d'appuyer les communautés à participer. Il y a pendant les visites des radios partenaires auprès de la communauté, il y a des sessions de démonstration et tout pour les expliquer. Donc, en plus de ces actions menées, nous avons d'autres approches pour vraiment les pousser à participer, à mettre ça, à avoir ça dans leurs habitudes. Donc, ce qui fait que au début de nos projets, on se rend compte que le taux d'interaction, généralement au début des projets, on voit que c'est pas beaucoup, on n'atteint pas toujours les résultats au début, mais au fur et à mesure que nous menons ces activités, ça booste vraiment l'interaction et la population finit par s'habituer, même les femmes. Par exemple, au Sénégal, au début, nous avons environ seulement 15% des participants aux émissions qui étaient des femmes. Aujourd'hui, actuellement, pour ces mêmes stations radio, nous avons plus de 60% des femmes qui sont les participants à ces émissions. C'est quelque chose qui n'est pas toujours, on n'a pas toujours l'habitude d'avoir ces résultats-là. Donc, nous travaillons vraiment sur la confiance à utiliser le téléphone pour interagir avec EULISA. Donc, il y a plein d'activités que nous menons avec nos partenaires pour vraiment faciliter l'accès et briser les différentes barrières qui empêchent les gens de participer. Merci.
Thank you, Alima. This is now all of the time that we had today, and we've even went beyond. Apologies about that, but it was so great to be able to hear the panelists answering some of those key questions. I apologize if we didn't have a chance to answer your question, but feel free to reach out to us. We would love to continue this discussion with all of you. We have the email address at the bottom of this slide and in the chat as well. And if you write to info@farmradio.org, we will be able to direct you to the right person to be continuing this discussion. I would like to give a special thanks to our panelists today. Thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. A big thank you as well to our 2 translators, Clementina and Sarah. Thank you very much as well to all of you for attending and taking the time in your busy day to be part of this discussion with us. Donc, merci beaucoup à tout le monde.